Welcome to a crossover Thursday edition of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We talked to Luke Robinson and Jake Thomas over the course of the day about the Alabama Crimson Tide. We start with Luke Robinson, and he lets us know what has been going on with the Tide.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hey, the Rebels play the Alabama Crimson Tide Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central. We get to see the next evolution of this explosive offense, and we get every play to witness. We can catch every bit of the action with David Kellum and the guys from the Ole Miss home team broadcast with SiriusXM on channel 191 or on the SXM app. Search Ole Miss Rebels. The Locked On Ole Miss podcast is there as well. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to get to Luke Robinson in just a second, but I do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASC medical.com. All right, so we have been breaking down the Ole Miss side of this game for the whole week, and today is all about the Alabama Crimson Tide. We're going to talk about their perspective in this game. We're going to talk about what's important for them, what they're concentrating on, how they see what's going on. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and get started. I'm here with Luke Robinson from Locked On Bama, and I'm Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss, and we're going to do a little crossover action. This is kind of a know your enemy section of the podcast. Luke, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great.
So let's go ahead and get into it, because the Ole Miss fans have a lot of question on what's going on internally with Alabama. Because I'm going to be honest, Luke, there's not been too many games where Ole Miss has went into a game in Bryant-Denny Stadium and against Alabama and felt this good, even though they're a 7-point dog, but they feel really good. What's going on in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I mean, there's signs of vulnerability, and you haven't seen that a lot in Alabama in quite some time. I mean, people love to try and say there were vulnerable signs back in 13 when they didn't win the three-peat because of the kick six, and then in 14 when they lose a game to Ole Miss, and in 15 when they lose a game to Ole Miss. I mean, it's just like, oh man, the dynasty's crumbling. Well, I mean, it always seemed to make its way back and seemed to be fine. And this feels different, though. It really does, simply because you don't see the fire in the belly necessarily, I think, from some of the players that we have been seeing. And, I think there are a lot of people who are calling for, hey, we'd like to see a little more infighting on the sidelines, not like fisticuffs or anything crazy, but just like some players getting in some other players' faces and things like that. And for whatever reason, this offensive line has not performed up to what most people believe to be its potential. And, then the quarterback play. I mean, look, when you have a fantastic quarterback, you can win just about any game. And if you got a below average quarterback, no matter what the rest of the team is, you can lose just about any game. And I mean, it's just the most important position in sports. And I think Jalen Milroe is better than an average quarterback. And I think clearly at this point, no matter who you were rooting for to be Alabama starter, I think clearly Jalen Milroe is the best option. Clearly. Now, will Ty Simpson grow into something better? Maybe. And he was fine last Saturday. But Alabama's got a lot of chinks in the armor right now. And, they're with new coordinators, with Saban's getting a little bit older. The schedule is quite arduous. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons to be kind of negative right now, even though what Jimmy and I over at Locked On Bama are trying the best to be as positive as we can.
Yeah, and this is weird. I actually heck, I guess I went to Bama Online. I think that was the site I went to, and it was on the message board. And you actually had Alabama fans that were calling other Alabama fans sunshine pumpers, which that doesn't sound like much. That happens on every board. But when you consider what Alabama's been for the last 15 years, and somebody actually going straight to sunshine pumping, it's like, yeah, that does feel like there's some sort of a cultural shift kind of within the fan base about Alabama football.
Well, look, for about 15 years, Alabama has been the gold standard. I mean, I know Georgia's won back to back, and that's wonderful. That is awesome. And they are short term, they're the gold standard, but for 15 years, it's clearly been Alabama. So Alabama fans aren't used to facing with adversity this early in the season. I mean, the loss to Texas left a lot of people scratching their heads simply because, number one, we didn't expect Texas to play that well because they haven't traditionally in the last decade or so played very well in games like this. And Alabama doesn't lose in September generally. Doesn't lose at home very often at all. They've only lost at home now 9 times in Saban's tenure. That's incredible. And I was there for that game. The atmosphere was outrageous. It's one of the best atmospheres I've ever been at. And I've been to a gazillion football games all over the United States, national championships, and that atmosphere was as good as any of them. And so we're not used to losing that. And so we sort of walked out, and all of a sudden then we think, okay, well, we're going to bury South Florida. And we come out and we sort of sleepwalking, and then you got this quarterback controversy in the middle of it. You got this rain delay in the middle of it. You're playing a G5 team on the road. It's just a lot of weird stuff. And all of a sudden now you're sort of filled with doubt. And that's something that we're all pretty unfamiliar with as Alabama fans, I can tell you, because my mantra has always been Saban will handle it. You know, I've always said I'd let Saban do my taxes without knowing anything about me. I mean, he'll handle it. He's the best. And right now, though, it feels like Alabama's a little lost in the wilderness. Now, they certainly can come out of it. But when you have things like this happen, you will have some infighting. And so Alabama fans are doing a little infighting right now.
Well, if you look on the other side of the coin, the storylines that are coming out of Oxford is the play of Jaxson Dart and how he is essentially taking what Matt Corral did. He just missed a year, but he's performing at an extremely high level. And this week could be a springboard to kind of becoming on that Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks at Ole Miss. I think Jaxson Dart is probably going to be the best quarterback that Alabama faces this year. And Ole Miss this season has been without 3 of its preseason weapons that they were counted on. And Quinshon Judkins has not particularly played well, and they've put up at over about 52 points a game on the season. Now, it looks like Zakhari Franklin might come back and play a little bit. Caden Prieskorn is probably going to be back. Quinshon Judkins is in a full go jersey, and we don't know about Tre Harris. Tre Harris has 8 catches on the season, and 5 of them for touchdowns. But offensively, this team is dynamic. Now, defensively, that is probably the thing that Alabama fans are going to be interested about, especially with that offense. I will say that Ole Miss fans love Pete Golden, so thank you very much for that. But explosive plays, I think that is probably going to be the key in this football game, because this defense, Ole Miss defense against Mercer, against Tulane, against Georgia Tech, have had coverage busts. That has been one area that Jalen Milroe has been somewhat proficient in quarterbacking. And that makes me a little bit nervous of him throwing the deep ball with a coverage bust, because in my opinion, if this game gets over, if Bama can score over 30 points, Bama's going to win the football game. Ole Miss's only hope is for mid-20s, a 27-20, a 24-17 type game. Ole Miss can win that game. But if you're going to ask this Ole Miss offense, as proficient it is, because it's still 4- and 5-star players on the other side, going to ask them to score 30 points, I just don't know if you can make hay with that.
Yeah, and look, I'm as an Alabama guy, I'm certainly hoping Milroe can take advantage of some of those coverage busts. And you say thank you for Pete Golden. We say you're very welcome, because I think the relationship with Pete Golding and Alabama got a little tenuous. He's a pretty good recruiter, and I think he's a very talented defensive coach. And I wouldn't try to match X's and O's with him or anything. But I can say this: it seemed like at times the defense was overcomplicated. I don't care what your scheme is. I don't like the idea of Will Anderson dropping back into coverage. Will Anderson's one of the best pass rushers maybe only second behind Derek Thomas all time at the University of Alabama. I don't want him dropping back. I want him attacking. And, you fit your scheme around that instead of the other way around. But I think Golding is better than Alabama fans want to admit he is. But that's another level to this game, right? That Alabama's taken on two former assistants that each have kind of odd relationships with Alabama and with Nick Saban, for that matter. It was pretty clear to me Nick Saban loved him some Pete Golding, loved him, and it just in the end, I think it just became too difficult to stay in Tuscaloosa, and I think it was just one of those mutual parting of the ways. Lane Kiffin, he brought a lot of excitement to Alabama. At the same time, eventually Alabama had to let him go during the playoffs. I mean, that's how bad things got with him. So, and now Lane Kiffin is going over and beyond, trying to show his respect to the GOAT, as he would love to say.
And he's also trolling Alabama, like
Big
on Twitter.
Time.
Yeah, he's absolutely. Lane Kiffin thinks he's winning this football game.
Oh, 100%.
Uh-huh.
And, I was just on a radio show in Montgomery, and the host thinks I'm a little bit paranoid about this. But I said, I saw something where there was a video of Lane Kiffin at the podium, and they put side by side with Nick Saban at the podium. And Lane Kiffin is almost mimicking every move Saban makes. And, the way he holds the podium, the way he moves his hands, the way he talks, the way he does hand gestures. And the radio host was saying, Luke, I think you're reading too much into this. I go, I don't think I am. I said, I think this is the genius of Lane Kiffin. He can make fun of you, and you're not sure if he's doing it. And he's sort of doing it in a lovingly, mockingly way. I don't think Lane Kiffin does 100% respect Nick Saban and appreciate Nick Saban. I believe that to my core. At the same time, just as I told the radio host that I'm a big fan of The Sopranos. And in The Sopranos, at one time, Tony Soprano had a lesson from The Art of War by Sun Tzu, where he said, if your opponent is agitated, irritate him more, because that gives you the upper hand. And I think that's kind of what he's doing by saying things like, hey, Kevin Steele's not even really calling the defense. And then somebody calls him out on it, and he's like, well, I'm just going by what I heard. I'm just saying, I didn't say it. I just heard somebody say it, kind of thing. And I think it's fun. I think it's playful. And I think it's so SEC that I love it. That's why I miss Coach Orgeron. I love anybody that brings color and fun into the SEC. And that's one reason that I can't get behind Zach Arnett at Mississippi State, because frankly, I can't remember his name very often. And you need to bring some color in here, because this is the SEC. We do things with flair,
When we get to the third segment, we'll talk about that LSU State game, because that's LSU is Ole Miss's next opponent. Mississippi State, I think, is yours, if I'm not mistaken, at Alabama. But that game was weird, for lack of a better word. But hey, we need to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves for their loved ones during the unexpected times in this world. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you the peace of mind so that you're not hoping you have access to the medication in emergencies. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medications in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and online consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. College football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every college Locked On channel. I will be on there on Friday. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insights and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. So, we were talking about how the relationship between Lane and Saban and all that when we went into the break. And you mentioned it was playful and it's fun, and Lane is kind of toeing the line. I do think that Lane thinks he's going to win this game, but he is publicly what he's saying, because we all know how the Birmingham news reporters are, is like, remember, Bo Wallace in 2014 made a comment that was like halfway not respecting the Tide, and that turned that into a week-long campaign of, what is going on here. So Lane Kiffin's talking like, this is the best program in 15 years. They're the best football team, period, in the world. Bryant Denny's the toughest place to play in America. All of that is just fantastic. And then you take that on Twitter, you have him posting a Taylor Swift song of Castles Crumbling, and where the lyrics are basically essentially saying the dynasty's ending, and all of this stuff that I think you're onto something, Luke.
And look, I'm here for it. I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, the old me would probably be like, this isn't what college football is all about. And that's kind of what college football is all about now. College football is all about Lil Wayne bringing the team out of the tunnel. College football is about Twitter wars. College football is about one coach manufacturing disrespect because another coach says he shouldn't wear sunglasses during interviews. And I'm not taking shots at Deion Sanders. I think Deion Sanders in college football game is wonderful. I love it. But you're right. And as we Alabama fans like to say, sometimes, when we see this effusive praise come from other coaches or come from other fans or whatever, we like, respecting us too much is kind of like disrespecting us, because a lot of times Alabama, and this is why Nick Saban is the greatest of all time. For the most part, he doesn't lose to teams that are unranked or much lesser than he is. There are very few times it's even a close game. That's what makes the South Florida game kind of scary, in that, even the best coaches get upset by, even the Pete Carroll lost to a Stanford team where he was a 38-point favorite. Those things just happen. And Nick Saban, it doesn't happen very often. So because it doesn't happen very often, then you get complacent. And when you get complacent, it makes it more apt to happen. So my point is, Nick Saban does a great job of dealing with the complacency usually. So we always have to manufacture some kind of disrespect so that we can get fired up ourselves. That's what bothers me so much about the Texas game, because I've go to a bunch of Alabama games. Now the Ole Miss game is going to be pretty fired up too, but I've gone to a bunch of Alabama games in this run, and I can tell you, for the most part, we're not the most rabid in the stadium fan base. We might be the most rabid on message boards. We might be the most rabid on Paul Feinbaum. We're not the most rabid in the stadium. In the stadium, we're more absorbing what's going on and really quite critical of our own team for the most part, to the point where I've always said that Auburn fans enjoy their wins more than we do, but they have more valleys than we do. So point being that I feel like we wasted an opportunity against Texas, because our fans were at a fever pitch, and it was crazy, just a crazy atmosphere, and we lost. And so it's just kind of weird to see that. But yeah, I think that for the most part is Alabama's going to try and manufacture something to be upset about. But here's where it could be dangerous for Ole Miss. Because of all that's happened these last couple of weeks, and because Milroe was unseated or quasi suspended or whatever it was that he didn't play at all, and now that he's been renamed the starter, you wonder if that's the spark. I mean, everybody's looking for this spark. I mean, you look at like you're grilling something. Alabama's got this, big green egg, and they've got the good charcoal that goes with it. They just hadn't been able to find a lighter. And so if they find this lighter, and if that's it, if renaming Milroe as the starter with much more of a confident statement, maybe that's what gets Alabama rolling. And if it is, then Alabama can play with anybody because they got the talent.
Yeah, it's like I told people all week. It's like, hey, if a team full of 4 and 5 star players play like a team full of 4 and 5 star players, Ole Miss is probably in trouble. The only hope that Ole Miss really has is that Alabama continues what they're doing. If there's a problem at the quarterback position, if there's a problem at the offensive line, I think that area for Alabama is the part that if I was an Alabama fan, I would be the most concerned about, because that is the group that hasn't happened. They may have complained about their offensive line play, but giving up 4 or 5 sacks against South Florida, that's very un-Crimson Tide. And I don't care if you have Tyler Buckner. I don't care if you have Ty Simpson. I don't care who's back there. That's going to make the quarterback play look worse than it is.
Yeah, and in that way, I'm sort of glad Milroe didn't play, because I feel like if he had been sacked that much, it would have just done that much more to affect his confidence. And then Alabama would be dealing with this quarterback controversy coming into the Ole Miss week, where we'd probably start Buckner. He probably wouldn't play very well, just like he didn't play very well against South Florida. Then we'd probably go to Ty Simpson, who would be playing his first significant minutes. And it would be worse because you're playing an SEC rival. And instead, Alabama took their lumps against South Florida. So in a way, it's kind of a blessing that Milroe didn't play against South Florida. And I know this is me being a Bama homer, looking for light at the end of the tunnel or whatever, trying to silver lining whatever that was Saturday, which was incredibly ugly. But I'd rather go through it against South Florida than go through it against Ole Miss.
Yeah, because, I mean, in 2015, y'all went through that against Ole Miss. That was the game y'all started Cooper Bateman.
Ironically, because Lane Kiffin insisted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, it was sort of the same deal in a lot of ways, that the offensive coordinator seemed to have the guy he wanted, and the coach had the guy he wanted. And eventually the coach relented to the offensive coordinator, and it became obvious pretty quickly the coach was right. And I think that's sort of the way this is in this case too.
You know, when we come back, we're going to go over the final lines and kind of give score predictions and all of that stuff. But I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get on the action. This app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options. I think Ole Miss currently is a 7-point underdog to Alabama and a single-digit line against Alabama. That's absolutely nuts, Luke.
On the road, it is for sure.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened twice this year already.
Yeah, I just don't know what to make of this. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Just so you know, the Ole Miss Rebels play the Alabama Crimson Tide Saturday at 2:30 Central. You can check the next evolution of the Ole Miss offense. You can check out what Jalen Milroe brings to the table for the Alabama Crimson Tide. You can catch every play of your hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on Channel 81 for the Alabama broadcast or Channel 191 for the Ole Miss broadcast. You can also search on the SXM app, Ole Miss Rebels or Alabama Crimson Tide, and both the Locked On Bama and the Locked On Ole Miss show is on there as well. We'd appreciate that very much. So, Luke, we're looking into the final things. What are the things that you expect to happen in this game?
Boy, that is a great question. It's a pretty simple question, but it's a great question because, frankly, I don't know. I am so worried about what Alabama team is going to show up. I hope that Milroe comes in rejuvenated. That's certainly my hope. I hope the offensive line comes in. They said they were pissed off the week before. Well, I don't know that they meant it. I hope they mean it this time. Alabama had the infamous or famous, whichever way you look at it, players only meeting after South Florida. They said a lot of things, a lot of the air was cleared. I've always looked at players only meetings and sort of squinted my eyes like, I think that's always a sign of a harbinger of bad things to come. But then some people pointed out, in 2015, Alabama had one after Ole Miss. And in 2017, I think they had one. And of course, they go on to win the national championship both those years. So maybe it'll be something that works out wonderfully for Alabama. I certainly hope so. But what I really hope to see is somebody step up and be an alpha, whether it be on offense or defense or both for Alabama. Some of the guys who I thought could be an alpha have not taken that role yet. And I'm not going to say any names because I feel like that could be insulting. But, I mean, you can read between the lines. I mean, these are some guys that some people believe will be All-Americans. I want to see them step up and get a little more vocal, get a little bit more in a teammate's face if they're not doing their job, whatever it is, because that's what has made Alabama so great over this last decade and a half, is that there have always been people there to get in some, hold other folks accountable. Like, you didn't require the coaches to get onto them because the players were doing it.
Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, what I expect this to be a back and forth, closer game. But what Ole Miss is going to want to do, and what would be beneficial for Ole Miss, would be to score early, to have a good first quarter. Do not fall into the trap that honestly Matt Corral did whenever the elephant goes off. You see the numbers on the helmet, and they were just a little bit slow getting going. And by the time with that offense, they were just going at that point. I think if you can get up on Alabama, if anybody's a soccer fan out there, there's going to be a tendency to be like the Mexican national team fans. When something bad goes wrong, you have a chance to where the mentality of the Alabama fans is not like we'll get them, we'll just keep going. It might be, oh no, here we go again a little bit, and I think that could be an advantage. I think Ole Miss, believe it or not, other than the fact that the game is at Bryant-Denny Stadium, I think Ole Miss holds every intangible advantage in this game, and that is absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, I can certainly see. I mean, I think Ole Miss certainly has an advantage at quarterback. I think they have a confidence advantage. Until I see Alabama differently, I think they have a confidence advantage. You know, the other positive things for Alabama, I would say, even in Alabama's kind of down years like 2000 when they went 3-8, they beat out Ole Miss that year.
Beat Ole Miss 45-7.
Yeah, and that was a horrible Alabama team. Now they had some talent, but the chemistry was just way off, and that was a team that got beat by Southern Miss 21-0. So, you know, and I know Ole Miss has beaten Alabama in 14 and 15. I certainly understand that. Mm-hmm. And I think some Alabama fans could also explain it away to a bit because it was very close games, both of them. And you rarely see a game where one team has, especially the home team, has 5 turnovers and the other team has 0. And and at the same time, you see a play where a quarterback throws the ball up, it bounces off one other player's helmet and right into the waiting hands of a streaking wide receiver. That's very rare. But, you know, sometimes those things happen, and that's just part of the game. I'm going to predict Alabama to win 31-30. I don't feel very confident about it. I don't think Alabama will cover. I think it's going to be tight throughout. I'm hoping in the end the mystique of Bryant-Denny carries some weight. But again, that is my homerific locked on Bama prediction. I have no problem saying that. I am not predicting a beat the brakes off of an Ole Miss type situation here.
This is going to be a fantastic game. And now I talk about this being a program game, and it's not necessarily about how good Alabama is. It's about what it means for Ole Miss. Because if Ole Miss wins this game, next week's game against LSU just becomes potentially the game of the year in the Southeastern Conference. And there's so much that it could happen. It means so much to the Ole Miss fan base. And I see people all the time, just like you, that's predicting Ole Miss to cover, but maybe not win the game. So that's kind of like hedging the bet. And you're locked on Bama. I get it. It's in the name. Homer's in the name. That's kind of like what I tell people about locked on Ole Miss. Homer's in the name. I don't know what you're expecting. But I do think that Ole Miss is going to come out and get a good start because Lane Kiffin does a fantastic job at opening scripts. Even in 2022, whenever they weren't quite right, it took a 4th down stop on the goal line where if that gets in, it might be a little bit different ball game. But when Alabama made that stop, the momentum swing took over so much, and the talent they had, they just kind of was able to engulf Ole Miss a little bit. I think this year, Ole Miss has a kicker that's an absolute weapon in Caden Davis. He made a 56-yard field goal against Tulane. Lane Kiffin is not going for it like he was. I think he's going to play Bama somewhat straight up. And because of that, Ole Miss is not going to have as many empty possessions, and that with the talent of Jaxson Dart, I do think Ole Miss is going to win this game straight up, like 27-21. If this game gets into the 30s, if both teams are in the 30s, Ole Miss is not winning this game. I think it's going to look more like 2014 than 2015.
I can certainly see it your way. I'm just banking that we're going to see a better Alabama. And boy, if we don't see a better Alabama, you got to start wondering where this season is going to end up.
Yeah, and we can talk about that real quick. If for some reason Alabama were to lose to Ole Miss, all of a sudden that Texas A&M game, the LSU game, they become problematic, don't they?
Well, it becomes almost not will Alabama make a bowl or anything. I mean, you hope not, but it becomes, how do you keep their interest level up? Now, if Alabama were to lose to Ole Miss, I mean, technically they don't control their own destiny because Ole Miss would have to lose twice, but you would feel okay about it because you look at Ole Miss's schedule, they got to go to Georgia. You got to feel like that's a loss. And then, you look at it, they'll go to
Auburn. They play LSU next week.
They play LSU the next week. I mean, they still got A&M, still got Arkansas, which can be a bugaboo at times. So yeah, there's some potential in there. But if you also lose to Ole Miss, that means you're 2-2 and you're 1-2 in September in your own place. That's just weird for Alabama, weird posture. And I don't know how the team would handle it.
Yeah, interesting indeed. Anyway, thanks for making our podcast your first podcast, first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Luke Robinson joining the show today. I'm Stephen Willis. I think this is going to be a really good game. Oh, yeah, we don't get Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler. We get the second team from CBS.
Oh, wow. Okay. I can live with that.
Yeah. So Gary Danielson not going to Alabama. Somebody needs to check and make sure Gary's okay.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now that is funny because I can tell you every Alabama fan thinks Gary Danielson hates Alabama. But I think every fan base thinks Gary Danielson hates their team. So it's all right.
Yeah. So we'll see you later. And good luck going over to the game and be safe, man.
Hey, I'm going to tell you, by the way, I miss Vern Lundquist. He was like the drunk uncle that comes over at Thanksgiving. I loved him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting whenever this goes over to ABC next year, which, by the way, if everybody hasn't noticed, the Disney games, any chance they've had to put an SEC game on at 2:30 on ABC, they've done that.
Yeah.
And that is because they're basically getting ready for next year. The same reason Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson are in Iowa is because CBS has turned the page to the Big Ten.
That's right. And I get it. Hey, that's the way the world works. Let's just make the best of it. I think I'll take my conference over everybody else's.
Yeah, and we're pretty steadfast in that one. Anyway, I appreciate it. Look, you have a good day and be safe heading over there.
Thank you, bud.